You gave the burden to God yesterday. You prayed about it. You meant what you said. And for a little while you rested. Then you woke up today, and there it was again. The same question. The same pressure. The same unfinished conversation playing through your mind as though prayer had never happened. And before you know it, you are not only troubled by the burden, you are troubled by the fact that you are troubled. You begin accusing yourself. If I really trusted God, why did this thought come back? If I truly surrendered it, why do I feel this pressure again? Now, the original concern has been joined by shame, and shame is a poor teacher. It does not show you what to do next. It merely tells you that you should already be doing better. But listen carefully. The return of a thought does not automatically prove the failure of your surrender. A thought can return to your attention without regaining the right to govern you. That is the distinction we must learn. Pressure may appear again. Fear may speak again. Waiting can make yesterday's questions feel brand new. And delay can invite the mind to replay every possibility. But the appearance of worry is not yet proof that you have agreed to carry it. It is a signal to become aware and respond. That should bring some relief. We're talking about real burdens here. Fear, stress, unanswered questions, long waiting, and circumstances you cannot settle by sheer effort. And when people are hurting under those things, they are looking for peace, rest, hope, comfort, and guidance. They are not helped by being told, you must never feel pressure again. They need to know what to do when pressure returns. That is when this lesson becomes practical. Anybody can speak confidently after everything has worked out. The discipline of trust is learned while the answer is still delayed, while the outcome is still beyond your reach, and while the mind is offering you another opportunity to take back what you placed in God's hands. The question is not simply, did the thought return? The question is, what will I do now that it has returned? We are going to settle whether casting your care is one decisive act, a repeated discipline, or both. We are going to look at how the instruction in 1 Peter 5 works together with the instruction in Philippians 4. And we are going to build a response you can practice at the first sign of mental replay, a response without panic, without self-condemnation, and without pretending the burden is unreal. We will ask what actually changes hands when care is cast upon God. We will also ask what remains in your hands afterward, because trust does not remove faithful responsibility. It removes the demand that you control what only God can hold. If you want to continue growing through Scripture-centered teaching like this, you are welcome to subscribe and remain with us through the lesson. That is simply an invitation to stay connected as we work through these truths together. Now, do not condemn yourself because today's mind remembered yesterday's burden. Recognize the moment. The burden may be presenting itself again, but presentation is not possession. The thought may be asking for your attention, but it does not have the authority to direct your prayer, dominate your imagination, or dictate your next action. So here is the first question we must answer. Is being approached by worry the same thing as consenting to carry it? No. Being approached by worry is not the same as agreeing to carry it. The two are related, because the approach creates the opportunity for agreement, but they are not identical. That distinction matters. If you confuse contact with consent, every anxious thought becomes evidence against you. The thought returns, and you conclude that surrender failed. Pressure rises, and you decide that faith must have disappeared. But that conclusion moves too quickly. Suppose a telephone rings. You heard it, but hearing it is not the same as answering it. Answering it is not the same as agreeing with everything said on the other end. Or suppose someone knocks at your door. The sound reached you without your permission. Yet hearing the knock does not require you to open the door, bring the visitor inside, offer a chair, and spend the evening in conversation. Now, Do not press the illustration farther than it should go. We are not saying that every concern can simply be ignored. Some calls should be answered. Some circumstances require attention. We are saying that the arrival of a thought and the acceptance of its rule are two different moments. You may feel pressure because something important is unresolved. Pressure can register in the mind and body. You may notice emotion, remember a deadline, become aware of a symptom, or recognize that a difficult circumstance still exists. Faith does not demand that you call those things imaginary. Denial is not trust. Trust can look directly at what is happening and still refuse to assume a responsibility God never assigned. Worry, in the sense we are addressing here, is the repeated mental assumption of responsibility for an outcome beyond your control. It keeps rehearsing what might happen as though enough rehearsal could secure the future. It revisits every possibility, tries to answer questions that cannot yet be answered, and then treats this exhausting activity as necessary supervision. The mind says, if I stop carrying this, who will keep everything from falling apart? That is the point where pressure is trying to become participation. You felt the concern. That is awareness. You notice fear trying to form a conclusion. That is recognition. But you do not have to follow it into 10 imagined tomorrows. You do not have to let it choose the tone of your prayer or command the next hour of your attention. The knock may be loud, but loudness is not authority. And here is where condemnation tries to add another weight. First, you fear the problem. Then you fear that having the thought proves you are faithless. Now you are carrying the circumstance and accusing yourself for feeling its pressure. You say a sincere believer would not be dealing with this again. Well, that accusation does not help you surrender. It keeps you staring at yourself when you need to turn toward God. Do not misunderstand me. We are not excusing a settled habit of worry. We are locating the moment when that habit can be interrupted. Temptation to worry is not yet participation in worry. The first anxious suggestion is not the same as building your mental life around it. You may not control every thought that arrives, but you can decide which thought receives agreement, repetition, and governing influence. So when the concern returns, let that recurrence become a decision point. You can say, I recognize this pressure, but I refuse renewed ownership of an outcome I cannot control. I will respond truthfully, pray specifically, and do what faithfulness requires of me today. That is not pretending the burden is small. It is maintaining the earlier decision while the burden remains real. The knock does not prove the door was never closed. It simply gives you another opportunity to keep it closed. Now we are ready for the practical question. If the thought has returned and you refuse to let it govern you, what do you do next? Scripture does not leave that moment empty. The instructions in 1 Peter 5 and Philippians 4 show us both the decisive surrender and the repeated practice that follows it. Then let us put the two passages beside each other and see the governing rule. 1 Peter 5 begins with humility under the mighty hand of God, and then it tells the believer to cast every care upon Him because He cares for the believer. Notice that order. Humility is not merely speaking softly about yourself. In this setting, humility includes admitting that you are not God, that you cannot govern every outcome, and that the burden belongs in stronger hands than yours. Pride says, I must keep control because everything depends upon me. Humility says, I will obey what is mine to do, but I will not claim authority over what belongs to God. So casting care is not indifference. It is an act of submission. You are yielding both the burden and your demand to control its conclusion. 1 Peter gives us the transfer. The care is directed away from the believer and toward God, and the reason given is His care for us. You are not casting the burden into emptiness. You are entrusting it to the one whose concern for you does not weaken when your circumstances remain unresolved. Now turn to Philippians 4. There the instruction unfolds as a practical sequence. Do not continue in anxiety, but in everything bring your request to God through prayer and petition with thanksgiving. Then the peace of God is described as guarding the heart and mind. And the passage does not stop with prayer. It goes on to direct attention toward what is true, honorable, just, pure, lovely, commendable, excellent, and worthy of praise. Do you see the movement? Anxiety begins pressing for continuance. Instead of giving it that continuance, you bring the actual matter to God. Not a vague religious sentence, but a request. You tell Him what concerns you. You ask for what is needed. You include thanksgiving, not because the answer is already visible and not because you are pretending the situation is pleasant, but because dependence remembers who God is while the outcome is still unsettled. Then peace guards. That does not require us to promise that every uncomfortable emotion will disappear the instant a prayer ends. The text presents peace as God's guarding ministry in the heart and mind. And because the mind still needs direction, attention is deliberately turned toward what is worthy and true. Prayer is not followed by careless imagination. The burden is brought to God, and the mind is trained not to rebuild the anxiety that prayer has just released. Now, these passages are not competing formulas. 1 Peter is not the say it once passage, while Philippians is the keep saying it until God listens passage. No. God does not need repeated persuasion to receive what He commanded you to cast upon Him. Each passage supplies a distinct part of one coherent practice. 1 Peter establishes the transfer of care. Philippians supplies the disciplined response when anxiety tries to resume control. That settles our question. Is casting care a one-time decision or a repeated discipline? It is both, but not in the same sense. Concerning the burden you have recognized, surrender is decisive. You entrust that outcome to God. Concerning the attempts of anxiety to reclaim your attention and agreement, discipline is repeated. You maintain the decision through prayer, thanksgiving, truthful attention, and faithful action. The surrender is decisive. The maintenance is repeated. You do not transfer the burden because God failed to receive it yesterday. You return to the practice because your mind is attempting to assume responsibility again today. Repetition does not mean heaven misplaced your care. It means you are refusing to cancel your delegation of trust. Suppose you pray at noon and the concern rises again at 3. You need not begin by condemning yourself, and you need not act as though God's care expired during the afternoon. You recognize what is happening. You bring the matter to Him specifically. You thank Him that His character and care have not changed. You turn your attention toward what is true. Then you proceed with the obedience that belongs to this hour. That is repeated enforcement, not repeated panic. Not a frantic effort to make the first prayer count. It is the calm maintenance of a settled decision. Are you hearing the distinction? The returning thought is not evidence that God returned the burden to you. It is an occasion to keep your trust where you placed it. You are not surrendering because the earlier surrender was false. You are defending it because the pressure is real. So let the two passages remain together. Humble yourself by releasing control. Cast the care because God cares for you. When anxiety attempts to continue, turn the concern into specific prayer. Add thanksgiving. Allow peace to guard rather than demanding that imagination supervise. Direct the mind toward truth. Then do what faithfulness requires. One, surrender concerning ownership. Repeated discipline concerning attention. One, delegation of the outcome. Repeated refusal to reclaim it. But that raises the next practical question. When you cast a burden upon God, what exactly changes hands and what still remains yours to carry? What changes hands is ownership of the outcome. What remains in your hands is the obedience required of you now. Keep that distinction clear, because confusion on either side will produce trouble. Think of a heavy suitcase. You have dragged it until your arm aches, and then someone strong enough to carry it says, give it to me. So you release the handle, and that person takes the weight. But suppose you immediately seize the handle again and keep pulling against him. You may say, I handed it over, but your conduct contradicts your words. The case has not become lighter because two people are now struggling over the same handle. Now, the illustration is limited. God is not merely walking beside you with luggage, but it helps us see this much. Transfer requires release. You cannot entrust the outcome to God while insisting that your mind must continue dragging every possible future behind it. What are you releasing? You are releasing the demand to control what you cannot control. You are releasing the burden of predicting every conclusion, preventing every unwanted possibility, answering every unanswered question, and solving the entire matter by thinking about it one more time. Mental rehearsal may feel like labor, but endless rehearsal is not the same as faithful work. It can exhaust you without moving one actual responsibility forward. But do not misunderstand surrender. You are not releasing truthful acknowledgement. If something is difficult, you may call it difficult. If information is needed, you may seek it appropriately. You are not releasing prayer, moral responsibility, practical wisdom, compassionate concern, or the duty to make a necessary decision. Casting care does not mean becoming careless. There is a great difference between refusing anxious ownership and refusing responsible action. One is trust. The other may simply be avoidance wearing religious language. A person can say, I have given it to God, when what he really means is, I do not want to face the conversation. Another may claim peace while ignoring a duty that is plainly present. Well, that is not the surrender we are describing. Genuine trust does not make obedience foggier. It makes obedience clearer, because the mind is no longer trying to perform God's part and its own part at the same time. You see, once you stop trying to govern the whole future, you can attend to the duty in front of you. You can tell the truth. You can ask forgiveness. You can make the call that belongs to you. You can seek wise help. You can keep a commitment. You can wait without inventing an answer. You can care deeply without claiming control. That is humility. Humility admits there are limits to what I know, what I can carry, and what I can cause. But it does not stop there. It also confesses that God's faithful care is not limited by your inability. You release the outcome because you are not sufficient to rule it, and because God is worthy of the trust you place in Him. So here is the usable test. After you have said, Lord, I give this to you, ask two questions. First, am I still trying to control the conclusion through fear, prediction, or mental replay? Second, is there a faithful action that still belongs to me? Release the first, retain the second. Release the outcome, keep the assignment, let go of imagined futures, attend to present truth, refuse the burden of control, accept the responsibility of obedience. That is neither denial nor passivity. It is responsible trust. And when the mind reaches again for what it released, the important thing is to notice that movement early. Before one anxious suggestion becomes a whole cycle, how can you recognize that your mental hand has returned to the handle? You recognize it by learning the sequence. Worry often feels like one sudden wave, but when you slow the moment down, you can usually see several movements. Something real reminds you that the matter is unresolved. Imagination supplies an unwanted future. The mind begins rehearsing that future as though repetition might prepare you or prevent it. Then the body responds to the imagined conclusion as though it has already been announced. Now, the first reminder may be legitimate. You remember that news has been delayed. You think about someone in your family. You become aware of financial pressure or health-related uncertainty. You lie down at night, the room grows quiet, and the unfinished matter seems to grow louder. None of that by itself means you have entered a governing cycle of worry. The movement occurs when awareness becomes prediction. Prediction becomes rehearsal, and rehearsal begins directing your inner life. You started with, this matter is still unresolved. But then the mind added, and this is probably how it will end. From there it moved to, if that happens, then this will follow, and after that something else will go wrong. Before long, you're answering questions no one has asked, defending yourself in conversations that have not happened, and suffering outcomes that have not been established. Are you listening? The mind can travel a long distance while the circumstances have not moved at all. That is why early recognition matters. You do not have to wait until fear has occupied the whole evening before you respond. You do not have to let the same scene play 20 times and then wonder why peace seems distant. What is recognized early can be surrendered before it becomes the mind's governing cycle. So pause and ask, am I seeking the next responsible action, or am I replaying what I cannot presently change? That question separates useful attention from anxious control. Responsible attention looks for truth, wisdom, and present obedience. Mental replay keeps circling an outcome it cannot settle. Then ask, am I praying, or am I merely circling the fear? Prayer turns toward God with the actual concern. Circling fear may use religious words, but attention remains fixed upon the threatening possibility. You can repeat, Lord, help me, while spending the rest of the thought explaining to yourself why help may not come. The words moved toward God, but the imagination kept moving around the fear. A third question may help. Has anything new happened, or has my mind supplied a new conclusion? Sometimes nothing has changed except the story being rehearsed. The delay is still a delay. The question is still unanswered. Yet imagination has promoted a possibility into a certainty, and the body has begun reacting to the promotion. At that point, do not scold yourself. Do not conduct a trial over why the thought appeared. Simply name the process. This concern is trying to become a carried care. That is calm recognition. It does not deny the concern, and it does not surrender to it. It identifies the moment when attention is reaching beyond present truth and attempting to reclaim ownership of the conclusion. But do not turn this teaching into obsessive self-monitoring. We are not asking you to examine every passing thought with alarm. If you become anxious about whether you might be becoming anxious, vigilance itself becomes another burden. Awareness serves faith. It is not meant to imprison attention. You notice the pattern so you can surrender, not so you can spend another hour analyzing your mental condition. You see, recognition should be brief. The purpose is not prolonged debate with fear. You do not need to hear its entire argument before refusing its authority. Once you see the movement from reminder to imagined future, from imagined future to repeated rehearsal, you have located the decision point. Pause. Tell the truth about what is happening. Then turn promptly toward God. This is the care. This is the attempt to reclaim it. This is the moment to maintain surrender. And now we must learn the first action at that decision point. Name the burden honestly, but do not negotiate with the anxious story. Recognition becomes useful when it leads to a definite response. So when you notice the anxious narrative beginning, do not answer it with a vague sentence about feeling overwhelmed. Name the actual care. What is the matter before you? Is it an unanswered question? A decision you cannot yet make? A need involving someone you love? A responsibility you must address? State it plainly. Vague dread gathers many fears into one undefined cloud, and then the mind feels threatened from every direction. Specific naming brings you back to the concern that is actually present. But here is the distinction. Name what is known without adding what fear predicts. You may say, I have not received the answer. That is factual acknowledgement. Fear says the absence of an answer proves that the worst has happened. That is narration. You may say this relationship is strained. That tells the truth. Fear adds, it will never be restored, and I will always live with this loss. That conclusion has not been established. Do you see it? Faith does not improve the story by inventing a pleasant ending. It simply refuses to give an imagined ending the authority of a fact. We are not replacing a fearful prediction with a guaranteed prediction of our own. We are staying with truth, entrusting what remains unknown to God, and refusing to let fear complete the account. Now make the response short enough to use when the thought first begins to gather momentum. You might say, this is my concern, this matter remains unresolved, I entrust it to God, and I will not continue rehearsing an outcome I do not know. That is not a formula. Those words do not control God, force a result, or guarantee that the circumstance will conclude as you prefer, and speaking them does not make difficult emotion illegitimate. You may still feel the seriousness of the matter. You may need to steady yourself and speak again later. The purpose is not to prove that you feel nothing. The purpose is to place your attention and choice in agreement with the truth you have learned. Neither are you performing for anyone. You need no audience, no dramatic tone, and no appearance of strength. You are simply giving your mind a clear direction. Fear has been talking in complete sentences. Now you answer with a truthful decision. So let us practice at once. If you are willing, quietly name one care before God. Do not explain every possible consequence. Do not argue with every frightening suggestion. Identify the real concern and then say aloud, this is the care I recognize. I entrust the outcome to God. I will not treat an imagined conclusion as a settled fact, and I will not continue rehearsing it. Now, having said that, do not spend the next 20 minutes repeating the sentence in panic, wondering whether you said it correctly. Endless repetition can become another way of staring at the burden. The sentence is an interruption, not an incantation. It marks the choice, honesty without exaggeration, surrender without denial, and attention without agreement with fear. Faith names the burden honestly, but it does not permit fear to write the rest of the story. And once the narration has been interrupted, the concern should not be left suspended in silence. The next movement is prayer. Take the matter you have named, bring it directly before God, and turn that specific care into a specific request. The care you have named now has somewhere to go. Do not keep discussing it only with yourself. Bring it before God as a request. There is a difference between thinking about a need in God's direction and actually asking Him for what you need. A person may say, Lord, you know, and then spend 10 minutes rehearsing the danger, predicting the result, and explaining why everything may go wrong. Prayer language is present, but the mind is still holding a private conference with fear. Petition turns outward. It takes the real matter to God. So move from I am worried about this to a clear request. If you lack understanding, ask for wisdom. If there's material need, ask for provision and direction in handling what is available. If the concern involves health, ask for healing, appropriate support, endurance, and wisdom for the decisions before you. If a relationship is strained, ask for reconciliation, humility, truthful speech, and courage to do your part. If the way forward is uncertain, ask for guidance. If the circumstance cannot presently be changed, ask for strength to remain faithful within it. Specificity does not mean dictating the outcome. You may ask honestly for what you desire without pretending you have authority over every detail of how and when the answer must appear. Petition says, this is what I need. Surrender says, I will not seize control of the conclusion. Do you see how the two belong together? A request without surrender can become a demand fueled by fear. Surrender without a request can become vague resignation. But prayer brings the need plainly before God and then leaves the government of the outcome with Him. And Philippians joins thanksgiving to prayer and petition. Now, thanksgiving is not denial. You are not required to call pain pleasant, uncertainty easy, or loss insignificant. Neither is gratitude a payment offered to purchase an answer. We do not thank God as though enough appreciation will obligate Him to follow our preferred schedule. Thanksgiving remembers while the matter remains unresolved. It remembers God's character. It remembers that His care is not created by today's emergency. It remembers prior faithfulness without claiming that the present circumstance must unfold in precisely the same manner as some earlier one. Gratitude steadies attention because it refuses to let the current pressure become the only truth in view. Here's a simple pattern you can use. First, acknowledge God's care. Second, state the request. Third, relinquish control of the outcome. Fourth, give thanks. Fifth, ask for wisdom concerning your next duty. You might pray, Father, you care for me and you understand this matter fully. I ask you for the wisdom, help, and provision that are needed. I release my demand to control the outcome or its timing. I thank you that your character remains trustworthy while I wait. Show me what obedience requires of me now and give me grace to do it. That prayer does not guarantee immediate healing, a particular financial result, a restored relationship by a certain date, or visible resolution on the timetable you would choose. We must not promise what has not been promised. Our confidence is not that we can control events by arranging the right words. Our confidence is that the care has been brought to God, His character remains worthy of trust, and we can continue faithfully with the light and responsibility we have. Now, someone may ask, if I pray again tomorrow, does that mean I fail to surrender today? Not necessarily. New information may arrive. A new decision may become necessary. The need may present a new dimension that should be brought honestly before God. Renewed petition responds to a genuinely present need. Anxious repetition is different. It repeats because it is trying to regain control. It asks the same thing again and again, not because anything has changed, but because the person is checking whether the prayer worked, whether it sounded strong enough, or whether one more repetition might force certainty. One practice turns toward God in dependence. The other keeps measuring the danger while borrowing the vocabulary of prayer. So ask yourself plainly, am I praying this matter? Or am I continuing the same mental replay with Lord placed at the beginning? That question is gently corrective, not condemning. If you notice that you have been narrating the fear in religious language, stop. Return to the actual request. Ask simply. Give thanks truthfully. Release the conclusion. Receive wisdom for the duty that belongs to you, and let the prayer in. Prayer converts anxious ownership into specific dependence and obedient trust. It places the need in relationship with God, the outcome under His authority, gratitude in the heart, and present obedience before the believer. But once the prayer is ended, the mind may attempt to gather the old evidence and reopen the entire matter. What then should receive your attention after you have made the request and entrusted the outcome to God? The answer is not an empty mind. The answer is a directed mind. After you have prayed, your attention must be given somewhere truthful, because imagination will gladly occupy any space you leave unguarded. A person may finish praying, say, I have entrusted this to God, and within 30 seconds begin constructing a catastrophe. He reviews the same uncertainty, predicts the same unwanted conclusion, and silently argues the case for disaster. Well, the prayer is ended, but anxious ownership has resumed. The lips release the matter, while the imagination immediately began trying to manage it again. Do not condemn yourself when you notice that movement, but do not cooperate with it either. Thought discipline means you recognize where attention is going and deliberately turn it toward what deserves agreement. Philippians directs attention toward what is true, honorable, just, pure, lovely, commendable, excellent, and worthy of praise. That is not a command to force the mind into blankness. Have you ever tried not to think about something by repeatedly checking whether you are still thinking about it? You can wear yourself out doing that. The mind does not need an empty room. It needs a worthy occupation. Begin with what is true. When a prediction appears, ask, is this a known fact, a useful preparation, or a fear-based invention? A known fact may need acknowledgement. A useful preparation may require action, but a fear-based invention should not be granted the authority of either one. Suppose the mind says, this delay means everything is going wrong. What is known? There is a delay. What preparation is presently useful? Perhaps none, or perhaps one clear step is available. What is fear invented? It has turned uncertainty into a verdict. Once you identify that, you need not keep arguing with the verdict. You can refuse it because it is not established truth. Now redirect your attention in one of three ways. First, return to a relevant scriptural truth. Not a sentence selected to guarantee your preferred result, but truth that governs your conduct and restores your perspective. God cares for you. The care may be entrusted to Him. You may bring your request with thanksgiving. Your responsibility is faithfulness in the present, not mastery over the future. Let Scripture tell you what is true about God, about your limits, and about the manner in which you are to proceed. Second, focus upon the next faithful duty. Ask what belongs to me now. The answer may be small. Complete the work before you. Gather accurate information. Keep an appointment. Speak patiently. Rest when it is time to rest. The mind wants to solve the entire future. Obedience usually asks for the next honest step. Third, give full attention to the person or task presently before you. Worry steals from the present in order to finance an imagined future. It can place you in a room with someone you love while your attention is living elsewhere. So return. Listen to the person speaking. Read the sentence in front of you. Prepare the meal. Finish the ordinary responsibility. Present attention is not denial of the unresolved matter. It is a refusal to let that matter consume responsibilities God has actually placed within reach. And what about confession, speaking truth aloud? It can be useful when it means agreement with truth and direction for conduct. You may say, God cares for me. I have entrusted this outcome to Him. I will attend to what is true and do what belongs to me now. Those words help bring thought and action into alignment. But words are not magic. Repeating a declaration does not force circumstances to obey your preference, and it does not guarantee the answer or timing you desire. Confession is not an instrument for controlling tomorrow. It is a truthful statement of whom you trust and how you intend to walk today. So remember the sequence. Notice the return. Refuse renewed ownership. Recall the truth. Resume obedience. Notice it without shame. Refuse it without prolonged debate. Recall what deserves agreement. Resume what faithfulness requires. That is how attention participates in practice peace. You do not leave the mind vacant after prayer, and you do not permit imagination to reopen what has been entrusted to God. You turn toward truth, toward the duty before you, and toward the life actually being lived. Now we can address that duty more fully, because releasing the outcome does not release you from your assignment. What then is your assignment? Take a sheet of paper in your mind and draw a line down the middle. On one side, place the outcome. On the other side, place your responsibility. This simple inventory can bring order when anxiety has mixed everything together. On the entrusted side, place what you cannot govern. The timing of an answer, the choices another person may make, development you cannot yet know, and the final result of the matter. You may influence some of these things, and you may pray earnestly about all of them, but you cannot command them. They do not belong under your control. On the responsibility side, place whatever faithfulness requires today. Depending upon the situation, that may mean telling the truth, making an important call, seeking qualified help, keeping an appointment, apologizing, examining a budget, taking proper rest, preparing wisely, or waiting faithfully. These are examples, not instructions that fit every circumstance. The question is not which activity will make me feel as though I am controlling something. The question is what duty is actually mine. You see, anxiety confuses the columns. It tries to move the final result onto your side, as though enough thought, enough tension, or enough inspection could secure it. Then it may move ordinary obedience onto God's side, as though surrender excused you from acting. But trust restores the boundary. God receives the outcome. You retain the assignment. Now, do not assume that practical action contradicts peace. Peace is not inactivity. You can make a careful decision without carrying every possible consequence in your mind. You can prepare thoroughly without pretending. Preparation guarantees the result. You can seek help without surrendering to panic. You can wait without becoming careless. A task may require your hands while the outcome remains outside your hands. That distinction matters. The presence of work does not prove that you must carry the burden mentally. If an appointment must be kept, keep it. If accurate counsel is needed, seek it. If a wrong must be acknowledged, acknowledge it. Do what is yours with honesty and steadiness, and refuse the demand to manage what follows after your obedience. There are two distortions here, and they appear to be opposites. One is anxious over-control. It says everything depends upon me, so I must anticipate every possibility and hold the whole matter together. The other is spiritualized neglect. It says I have entrusted this to God, so I need not face the duty before me. Yet both are attempts to escape humble dependence. Over-control avoids dependence by pretending to possess power you do not have. Neglect avoids dependence by refusing the responsibility you do have. Humility accepts both limits at once. I cannot determine the conclusion, but I can obey within the present moment. That is responsible trust. It neither seizes God's place nor abandons your own. It acts where action is available, seeks wisdom where judgment is needed, receives help where help is appropriate, and waits when waiting is the only faithful course. Then, having acted, it does not demand that the mind supervise every unseen development. So when care rises again, return to this decision question: what is the next faithful action available now, and what outcome must remain entrusted to God? Answer both parts. Do not use surrender to avoid the action, and do not use the action to reclaim the outcome. Carry the assignment without carrying the entire future. And this distinction becomes especially important when you have prayed, acted wisely, and morning arrives with no visible change. The matter is still open. The pressure speaks again. That prolonged delay is where this practice must become durable. Suppose then that nothing has changed by morning. You prayed, you gave thanks, you did what wisdom required, yet the answer has not come, the pressure has not lifted, and your body still feels the strain. What now? You practice the decision again, not because yesterday's surrender was false, but because today's pressure presents the decision again. Consider this clearly hypothetical situation. You are waiting for important news, and another day begins without it. That silence is the trigger. Imagination says the delay must mean something has gone badly, and when the answer comes, I will not be able to handle it. Stop there. What is known, the news has not arrived. What has been imagined, the meaning of the delay and the consequences that might follow. Now turn the care into a request. Father, give me wisdom, endurance, and whatever help this situation truly requires. Entrust the arrival, timing, content, and consequences of the answer to God. Then ask what responsibility belongs to this day. Perhaps one appropriate inquiry should be made. Perhaps there is nothing further to do but complete today's duties without repeatedly checking for a change. Redirect attention with chosen truth. God's care has not been canceled by silence, and an unanswered question is not permission to invent an answer. Now vary the situation. These are still hypothetical examples, not personal testimony offered as proof. A symptom recurs while proper evaluation is pending. The bodily sensation is the trigger. Fear supplies the conclusion this must be the worst possibility and everything is about to change. The request becomes specific. God, grant healing, sound judgment, appropriate support, and steadiness while I seek proper care. The outcome of the evaluation is entrusted to Him. The next responsibility may be recording accurate information, following qualified guidance, or keeping the scheduled evaluation. The redirection is truthful. The symptom deserves responsible attention, but fear's diagnosis has not become fact. Our supposed tension remains in a family relationship. A brief remark, an unanswered message, or another difficult interaction becomes the trigger. The imagined outcome says this will never improve. The relationship is permanently lost. Pray for humility, reconciliation, truthful speech, and courage. Entrust the other person's response and the eventual condition of the relationship to God. Your next action may be to listen without defending yourself. Correct what you did wrong, or refrain from forcing a conversation at the wrong time. Then redirect attention. You are responsible for faithfulness in your words and conduct, not for controlling another heart. Or consider an approaching financial obligation. The date on the calendar becomes the trigger. Imagination begins adding losses, humiliations, and consequences that have not occurred. Ask for provision, wisdom, favor, and discipline. Entrust the final outcome and every factor beyond your reach to God. Then take the next honest step. Review what is actually available, communicate where communication is required, seek sound counsel, and refuse both panic and avoidance. The chosen truth is plain. Present need calls for present wisdom, not a private rehearsal of ruin. Do you see the durable pattern? Trigger, imagined outcome, specific request, entrusted result, responsible action, truthful redirection, then repeat it whenever pressure tries to govern you again. You may need to refuse the same care 10 times during a long day or return to the same decision across many weeks. Do not turn the number of repetitions into a score of spiritual worth. You are not more accepted because the thought returned only twice, and you have not necessarily failed because it returned repeatedly. Renewed pressure calls for renewed practice, not renewed condemnation. And do not require your emotions to move as quickly as your decision. Your breathing may remain unsettled. Your muscles may still feel tense. Tears may come after sincere prayer. The body can lag behind the will, and emotional intensity is not an infallible report of who owns the outcome. Let the decision stand while calm arrives gradually, or while you continue faithfully without the calm you wanted. Neither should delay force you to manufacture an explanation. You do not have to decide that God has rejected you, that your prayer was defective, or that you know why the answer has not appeared. And you must not judge His care solely by speed. Delay may repeat the decision point, but it does not cancel His care. So when circumstances remain unresolved, maintain surrender through specific prayer, truthful attention, and the next faithful action. That is how responsible trust endures. But what kind of peace can exist while the problem is still present? That is the peace we must now define. Peace, then, is not the absence of an unresolved circumstance. It is the inward fruit of walking the pathway Philippians has already given. Prayer instead of anxious ownership. Specific petition instead of vague dread. Thanksgiving instead of allowing pressure to become the only truth in view. And disciplined attention instead of surrendering the mind to imagined conclusions. The peace that guards the heart and mind is connected to that whole movement. We bring the matter to God, entrust the result to Him, direct attention toward truth, and continue in faithful action. Now, do not misunderstand what that peace may look like. Sometimes it will be felt as settled confidence. The inner agitation quiets. The breathing becomes easier, and the mind is no longer racing ahead. Receive that with gratitude. But peace is not limited to that particular experience. At another time, practiced peace may appear as restored attention. The problem still exists, yet you can listen, work, rest, or speak without the feared outcome occupying every thought. Sometimes peace is simply the freedom to perform the next duty. You do not know how the whole matter will conclude, but you are able to do what belongs to you without demanding control of what follows. And sometimes peace is the definite refusal to obey fear while emotion is still settling. The feeling says retreat. Truth says take the faithful step. You take that step not because you feel invulnerable, but because fear is no longer making the decision. That is peace exercising government. It does not always remove pressure immediately. It removes pressure from the throne. You see, if you define peace as never feeling concern again, you will condemn yourself every time the matter returns to your awareness. If you define peace as pretending the circumstance is easy, you will have to deny what is plainly difficult. And if you define peace as certainty that the result will be exactly what you prefer, then you have merely given control a religious name. Biblical peace does not require any of those things. The circumstance may still be serious. Further concern may arise. Additional prayer may be appropriate. New information may require another decision. None of that proves peace has disappeared. The question is not whether pressure has spoken. The question is whether pressure has been permitted to govern your praying, your thinking, and your acting. So assess yourself there. Is fear still deciding what you will believe before the facts are known? Is it deciding whether you will pray with trust or merely rehearse danger? Is it directing your attention, choosing your words, delaying necessary obedience, or driving unnecessary action? Or can you now bring the request to God, give thanks without denial, distinguish truth from prediction, and carry out the next responsibility without handing your heart over to the feared conclusion? That is a more honest measure of growth. You may still feel strain, yet recover your attention sooner. You may recognize mental replay earlier. You may release the outcome without a long argument. You may return to truth with less shame and resume obedience with greater steadiness. The pressure has not necessarily become quieter, but you have become less willing to take your instructions from it. And when it returns again, you follow the same scriptural pathway, not as a mechanical formula, and not as punishment for failing to maintain a perfect feeling. You recognize the care, make the request, give thanks, entrust the result, choose truthful attention, and continue with what faithfulness requires. Each return can become clearer, quicker, and less condemning. That is maintenance. That is practice peace. Peace stands guard while you keep walking. It protects the heart from surrendering to the feared outcome and the mind from treating imagination as truth, while your hands remain available for the duty of the present moment. The problem may remain, but it no longer receives unquestioned authority over your inner life. Now we are ready to gather the whole teaching into one final decision: what belongs with God, what belongs in your thoughts, and what faithful action remains in your hands when worry returns. Here is the final answer. When worry returns, return to the decision. The return of the thought does not automatically mean the return of ownership. It means the matter has come to your attention again, and now you have another opportunity to practice what you have already decided. The care belongs with God, truth belongs in your mind, and the next faithful action belongs in your hands. So remember the sequence. Recognize the anxious cycle before it gathers momentum. Name the specific care without letting fear supply the conclusion. Bring your request to God with thanksgiving. Relinquish the outcome and its timing. Redirect your attention toward what is true. Then perform the next faithful action available to you. That is the whole pathway. Recognize, name, request, give thanks, release, redirect, obey. Now, if you are willing, open your hands where you are. You may lift them if that helps you express the decision. There is no spiritual merit in the gesture. Opening your hands does not earn an answer, compel a result, or produce a miracle. It is simply an honest sign that you are choosing not to clutch what you cannot control. And if you prefer not to make the gesture, you can still make the decision sincerely before God. With your hands open, quietly identify the care. Do not name 10 imaginary consequences. Name the actual matter. Then say this aloud: if you are able. I entrust this care to God because He cares for me. I refuse to let fear govern my thoughts, my words, or my actions. I will bring my request to God with thanksgiving. I release the outcome and the timing to Him. I receive the direction Scripture gives me for my thoughts and conduct. I will attend to what is true, and I will remain faithful to the next duty that belongs to me. Now let those words stand. You do not have to inspect your emotions to determine whether you said them well enough. You do not have to repeat them frantically until you feel different. This is not a formula. It is a decision of trust, and it may be maintained whenever the pressure presents itself again. Let us pray. Father, you see every care represented in this moment, including the matters we cannot explain and the outcomes we cannot govern. Give us wisdom for the decisions that belong to us and steadiness while answers remain incomplete. Teach us to recognize anxious replay early, to bring specific requests to you with honest thanksgiving, and to release the conclusions we have tried to control. Direct our attention toward truth. Guard us from treating fear's predictions as established facts. Give us courage to take the next faithful step, patience when the faithful step is waiting, and humility to seek appropriate help when help is needed. Form in us practice peace, not denial, not passivity, and not confidence in a preferred result, but a growing freedom to trust you and obey while circumstances remain unresolved. Amen. Now here is the challenge. When the thought returns, do not make its return a charge against yourself. Let it become your cue. Recognize it sooner. Release it more readily. Return your attention to truth. Resume obedience without shame. You surrendered decisively, and you maintain that surrender repeatedly. Both are true. 1 Peter 5 shows you where the care belongs. Philippians 4 shows you how to respond when anxiety presses again. Prayer, petition, thanksgiving, guarded thought, and continued practice. One passage calls for transferred ownership. The other trains your response after the transfer. Together they leave no room for anxious control, but they also leave no room for neglect. So go forward with open hands and available attention. You are not responsible for mastering tomorrow. You are responsible for trusting God and walking faithfully in the light you have today. If pressure returns, practice the decision again. No condemnation, no bargain, no manufactured certainty. Bring the care to God, give truth your agreement, and give the present duty your obedience. If you would like, place in the comments the truth from 1 Peter 5 or Philippians 4 that you are choosing to believe and practice. Or name one brief Scripture-aligned step of faith you will take. And if this teaching may help someone burdened by recurring worry, you may share it with them or subscribe for future teaching. We will offer the truth faithfully and leave every spiritual result with God.